Hi, my name's Stuart. I'm the minister at St Ninian's Church in Stonehouse. Welcome to ctl-alt-del-church, the show where we think about what it's been like when someone turned off the church and turned it back on again. Today on the podcast, I'm joined by Kenny Maddock, who's an elder at Hamilton South Church, and by Stuart Love, who is a minister on the south side of Glasgow.
Shut up and sit down.
Hi, Stuart. It's great to have you and Kenny along for the conversation this week. Neither of you were here for the first episode, so people will, if they tuned in, will know who I am. I'm Stuart. I'm the minister at St Ninian's Church in Stonehouse. So we have another Stuart, which will be hugely confusing this week. So, other Stuart, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, I'm Stuart Love. I'm minister of Clinkert Hill Parish Church, which is on the south side of Glasgow. Nearest landmark is Hampden Park. So if you know where Hampden is, you're pretty close to where we are.
Excellent. And the person in my top left-hand corner is Kenny. How are you doing, Kenny?
I'm good, sir. My name's Kenny Maddock. I'm an elder at Motherwell South Parish Church. I'm also Presbytery elder, which is where I know Stuart Cutler from. We're on the Mission Education and Discipleship Committee together, and put this together as a form of kind of discussing how churches are looking at different things and different ways of mission, of ministry, and of contacting people during this crisis.
Yeah. Okay. So, Stuart, what was happening for you around about the time of the kind of lead up to lockdown? So it's like 6 weeks ago now, isn't it? And almost 7 weeks, I guess, because we had that week before that we kind of knew what was going to be happening. So I think you were in a fairly interesting situation at that point.
Yes, I was an ill-informed bystander because I'd been off on 4 weeks paternity leave. So my first Sunday back was my last Sunday back. And I remember leading that service, and I know talking to others, there was maybe this sense of impending shutdown, but not for me because, I'm just back. I was not completely, but fairly unaware of what had transpired and where things were at with the spread of the virus, because we'd been focusing on our wee one. So yeah, it was one Sunday back, and then suddenly, that was it.
Did you have a sense? I remember quite vividly that Sunday where I was kind of standing in the pulpit at one point looking at a bunch of people, most of whom were over 70, and many of whom had a kind of underlying health conditions or present health conditions, kind of thing, that thinking you really shouldn't be here, and wondering. I remember feeling quite anxious at that point. So you're saying that you were less than anxious. You were looking forward to getting back home. And
yes. Well, when they said that that's it, things are shutting down, I did sort of think, this is nice. I'm going to get more time with Anna. And actually, in fairness, as my wife Ruth and I have been reflecting on the relationship that I now have with Anna, we both agree that the last 6 or 7 weeks have been absolutely vital in helping me build up a really strong bond with her that I otherwise wouldn't have had. So there is definitely something in this that highlights the deficiency of paternity leave. That is obviously just my very personal take on it. There are other concerns that have since come up as time has gone on, and we've tried to continue to minister as a church, but kind of in the immediate week or so afterwards, there was a sense of, this is quite nice.
So what, first week back, so let's go back a little bit. How long have you been minister in your current charge?
3.5 years.
3.5 years.
So my first charge.
So it's your first charge. So kind of much like me, I'm almost at 3 years. And I was reflecting, I get supervision every 6 weeks or so. And just before Christmas, my supervisor said, so where do you think you're at? And I remember saying to her that I feel as though I'm at the end of the beginning. I'd kind of got to a place where I felt as though I knew people properly. And that had taken the best part of kind of 2.5, almost 3 years, to really get to know this group of people. And I kind of a level beyond knowing most of their names and where they sit on a Sunday. Starting to kind of know their families and their concerns and all that kind of stuff. So I guess, that might be kind of broadly similar for you, yeah?
Yes. Where we're at in terms of our journey as a congregation, every year I give us a verse for the year. Mm-hmm. And that just helps to shape what our worship is like. It gives us a kind of theme. So I felt very strongly at the end of 2019 that God was saying to me, this will be a significant year for Clinkert Hill. And so the verse of the year that I picked was from Joshua chapter 1, be strong and courageous, do not be afraid, don't be discouraged, for the Lord your God will be with you wherever you go. And I kind of envisaged that, having been here 3 going on 4 years, that it was kind of getting to that point of, okay, the rubber's going to hit the road. We're going to start seeing the fruits of the work that we're doing here. As it turns out, and I don't think any of us could have imagined that God's lesson was, it's going to be a significant year because you're going to be shut down and you're not going to be able to meet. And actually, it's amazing how God works, because the number of people I've spoken to who have said that verse of the year that you gave us, which God kind of helped me arrive at late 2019, none of this was in view. They've said it's just spoken so powerfully to us that right now we need to be strong and courageous, even although we're finding ourselves in a situation which makes us worry and is totally new and unfamiliar.
So in that first week then, so you go from your first week back, getting the news halfway through the week that church isn't going to be on Sunday. What did you do?
It changed really quickly, because initially it was services can't happen, but you can be open for prayer. Mm-hmm. All right, we can do that. And then I think 40 hours later, oh no, you can't even open for prayer. Oh, okay. Because our intention had been to move something online, but to try and keep the building open for as long as possible. Because you say looking out on a Sunday morning, when I look out, I know that there are a significant number who are not online. And therefore, the presence of the building was really important, which was why I really wanted to keep it open. But that didn't happen. So what we ended up doing, myself and the session clerk both got a cuppa, and we stood outside the church building that first Sunday morning, just in case anybody did turn up, and we had a leaflet to say, sorry, nothing's happening now, here's some information, keep a lookout on the website and the Facebook page, and you'll see things as they develop, which was quite fun, because about half a dozen or so folk did turn up, and we had a nice socially distanced conversation with a few people, and you caught a few other passers-by and just talking to them about the situation as well. So within that first week, it was then a case of figuring out, okay, what can I provide for the congregation and that will be helpful and meaningful to them as we go forward.
Kenny, you're in a different place. You're an elder at Motherwell South, but you don't live close by.
No.
So I guess your experience of that has been much more socially distant from your congregation than even Stuart and I live across the road from from my
yeah,
church.
absolutely. I mean, yeah. So we live in the south side of Glasgow. We live in Mearns, so we're probably about 20-minute drive from Motherwell South anyway. Most weekends we go through on the Saturday night and like stay with my parents, and then that means we get to see them every week, and then they get to see the dog because they're obviously very, they're in love with their dog as much as we're in love with our dog. But even that side of things is kind of, it's weird not having that. It's weird not having it was quite, Saturday night used to be the time that my wife Christine and I would spend preparing for the youth group on the Sunday morning, and that would be time when we would set aside to plan the devotions, plan what food we're making with the kids, plan what topic we were going to cover with them, and discuss it with my mum and dad, and discuss church life in general as well, and just kind of catch up with what they've been doing during the week. So it was quite a shock to the system just to sort of have that stop completely. I mean, even the Sunday before this all stopped, this all happened, we even had socially distanced seating in the church because we've got individual chairs and we just removed them and made them 2 meters apart. So like, it's quite an interesting way to worship on that Sunday as well. And kind of think that made me and made a lot of people realise that this wasn't going to be something that was going to A, go away, and B, ever sort of mean that worship would ever really be the same again, because it will change as a result of all this. And we've kind of seen that start to happen with how the church is communicating different needs and different requirements of the local population and stuff. So we'll have her on into another one of these, but our worship convener, Anne McCrum's been sending a prayer request email or chain email out, which has gone from something like 30 email addresses to 100 in the last 6 weeks, and contacting, more people than that in terms of who's getting to find out that information about A, what's going on in the parish, and B, what's going on in people's lives. Like Christine and I found out about people in our congregation who had the virus through that email that we would never have heard about otherwise because of where we are. So it's quite an interesting way of doing it. And finding out that sort of information. So it's now at the point where we're getting a daily prayer email from Anne, which includes like kind of some small devotions and some guidance for helping people pray about the situation and stuff, which has been really, really uplifting to have coming from someone, just that sort of, it's a link back to everybody else. And we're still meeting we have a children's and families development worker who's kind of coordinating stuff with myself and Christine and the other leaders of our Sunday club or Sunday school called Climb and Catch. So we meet every Tuesday night together to plan how we're going to do virtual Sunday school, which we're doing every fortnight now, which is only 20 minutes on a Sunday morning, kind of like 10:30 in the run up to 11 o'clock before the service goes online. But it's a nice way of keeping the kids in touch with one another as well. So we're kind of looking at different ways of how we can do and deliver stuff for the church family. We had a great meeting this morning, actually. We're talking about doing a virtual holiday club or something similar to that over the summer, kind of starting in June, going all the way through July and August. So we're starting to plan how we might be able to do something like that. Obviously, that might change depending on what comes in the future, but at the minute, we're planning for not being able to speak to anyone other than through this sort of medium. But it's interesting. It's actually probably increased our communication and made it a lot better than it would have been in the past because of the situation that we find ourselves in. It means that everybody's a lot more connected, which is, it's nice because, you don't, it's not that you're forgotten about when you live out the parish, but you do feel distance sometimes because, stuff gets spoken about at the coffee morning on a Tuesday or at a meeting on the Wednesday, and you're not there for it. But it's nice to kind of find another way of being able to keep in the loop with everybody and everything else that's going on.
One of the things Stuart said, and what I guess one of the things that I've been really mindful of, is that lots of people aren't online. So for you, as someone who's online connected, that's been a really good experience. Yeah. Stuart, you were already kind of talking about kind of sort of an initial low-tech response, to stand at the door with flyers and say, we're not on, because you can't be sure that people are going to hear, because that's what happens, isn't it? I was out for a walk with the dog a couple of days ago and I met someone who comes to church every week who said, so what are you doing now that the church is shut? And that's 6 weeks on, and she hadn't heard of any of the things that we were doing. So there is that kind of sense that some people will hear and some people won't hear, and that's a difficult balance always to strike. So Stuart, in your kind of the week after the leaflet week, you're now offering services and other things online. So what kind of decision process did you go through around about what to do?
I very quickly came to the decision that I was not going to do a service in the sense of trying to replicate what we do on a Sunday for a couple of reasons. One was capacity, because I thought this needs to be something that can be fairly easily pulled together. And I didn't get the sense, although we have a few folk in the congregation who are technically minded, I thought this is something that I feel we don't necessarily have the capacity to do a whole service. The second reason that I deliberately didn't do this is because very suddenly we had quite a crowded marketplace. Because I became very aware that everybody was jumping online, and it was, we've all got to be doing online services and so on. And my reasoning was there are places that have been live streaming and recording whole services far longer and will do it far better and to a much higher quality than I could cobble together. I did my probation, for example, at DL St Andrews in Hamilton Presbytery, who are an example. My father-in-law is the minister of Claremont Parish Church. These are places that have been doing this for a long time. So what I did was I said to folk, if you want a Sunday service, there are loads of options out there. Here's the Church of Scotland compiled a list. I sent that out. I also said, I reckon that Songs of Praise is probably getting the highest viewership that it's had for at least a decade at the moment. But there was still the question of, well, what do I do for us? So I had to think and reflected, well, what are my strengths and what is my what do I feel is my primary calling? And I came to the conclusion that the thing that I love about Sunday worship is the opportunity to teach people what the Bible means, to have a passage and to spend time unpicking that and unpacking that and saying, this is what it's all about. So that was the beginning of a study in the study. And what I've tried to create is this sense of inviting people into my study to say, this is where I do all this Bible work every week. So come and join me, come and sit with me. It's like having a coffee with me and we'll open a Bible passage. And I figured that I could do that several times a week, because the aim is about a 10 to 15 minute video. So it's something that you could watch as like your morning or evening devotion or something like that. So I went for sort of short and to the point, and tried to have that sense of, I'm inviting you in to join me and we have a conversation. And when I described it all to Ruth, she said, it's about as close to a Bible study as you can get with one man talking to a camera. But that was it. That was what I aimed for. I also have another series that's kind of running in as well, called the Saturday and Sunday Specials. And this was initially, people had a lot of questions and were interested to know what their minister thought in answer to those questions. So I did a few Saturday, Sunday specials, which were more thematic. That's on hold at the moment because I've run out of questions to answer. But, anyone wants to fire any questions at me, then I can easily, start that back up again.
So what? Yeah. So Ruth's observation is really interesting, isn't it? I kind of went down the road of, much like you, there's no way we're going to try and replicate a whole service. Although the first week I did go to the church and record a kind of a prayer reading, a sermon, and a blessing kind of thing. So it was almost the service but without the hymns, and that's evolved kind of as we kind of go on, and now it's in the living room with, me sitting talking to my mobile phone, which is a really strange experience. It's very different from having a conversation with people, even like this. So how does one plan a Bible study, knowing that people are going to be sitting on the other end of it, hopefully thinking, "Oh, that's really interesting." So can they engage with it? How do you put it together to kind of prompt that sort of conversation that's never going to be an actual conversation? So what kind of things are you thinking about?
So I came up with 3 questions, 2 of which I answer and 1 of which is left to the viewer to answer at home. So the first question is, what did this passage mean when it was first written? And I kind of reason, I'm the guy that's been trained to answer that, so I should probably give it. So that's just explaining, when this passage was written, this is likely what the author had in mind when they wrote what they did. The second question is, where is Jesus in the passage? Because if we believe that he is the living word and the Bible is the written word, then every passage in some way connects to him. So again, just trying to see within the passage where is Jesus. Sometimes it's explicit because he's mentioned, sometimes it's more implicit because maybe a concept points to him or something like that. And then the last question is, what does this passage mean to me today? Or what has God said to me through this passage? And so occasionally I'll share maybe a thought or two about what I believe God said to me, but it's very much a question that, having heard what the passage means and having seen Jesus in it, my hope is that I've equipped the person watching to now spend some time after the video's done to reflect on that themselves. And I say that at the end of almost every video, to say, take some time after this video's finished to pray about these things and talk it back to God. Don't just stop the video and go on. So it is supposed to be a bit more devotional in that sense. And so I hope that what I'm doing is I'm giving the person watching the tools to answer the third question for themselves, even though I'm not there to help them with that reflection.
What kind of feedback have you had on that? And does
I'm
that
just
matter?
remembering. Well, it doesn't. It doesn't. I'm laughing because I remember.
You're enjoying yourself.
Yeah, I am. To be fair, having been a consumer on YouTube for many years now, I've always kind of had a wee wonder, what would it be like if I became a content creator? And so this has given me the space to actually explore that, and it has been good fun. The reason I was laughing though is because I think, as with most YouTube videos, you do initially get the bot comments. So these are not real people. These are just software generated comments, but they're so encouraging. They are. We love Reverend Stuart Love. I'm thinking, I know this isn't a real person, but yeah, that's good. I like this. Yeah. And then after about a fortnight, the bot comments stopped coming, and I said to Ruth, "Oh, I really missed them. They were really good." Yeah. I have spoken to a few folk who have expressed appreciation for what I'm doing. I've also spoken to a few folk in the congregation whom I have to say I would have placed firmly in the category of not online, and they've said, "Oh yes, we tune in to see your videos." So that's been encouraging too. And as I hope that the format I'm doing it, because it's pre-recorded, because it's uploaded, I upload it on a Sunday, Tuesday, and Thursday evening, so that it'll catch those that want to watch it in the evening. So I'll maybe get a few views, and then it goes quiet overnight, and then you'll see a spike the following morning, because there's folk obviously getting up and engaging with it then. And that's another reason I went for a recording rather than a live stream, because it means that you can watch it at your leisure.
Yep.
Which I think is helpful for folk.
How do you guys, or how have you guys looked at sharing that with people who aren't necessarily online? how are you managing that sort of outreach with your Kirk session and elders and districts and things? Are you looking into how you could do that, or is it just a case of we get it to the people we can? How does that work?
Well, I think we're taking steps now to think more about those that are not online. I think because initially to get the stuff online, it did require a fair amount of work, but it was also the path of least resistance.
Yeah.
Get it up, share it through. We share it through our Facebook page. We also share it through our website because we know that not everybody has a Facebook page, but maybe online elsewhere. What we did just a couple of weeks ago, we sent out our May newsletter.
Yeah.
And we've decided that we're going to do that fortnightly rather than monthly for the time being, just to connect with people who are not online. If you are online, you'll get it emailed, but if you're not, you'll receive a hard copy in the post. I've also seen just recently something that's popped up where you can upload audio clips of services or sermons or whatever to something, and you can phone and dial in. And that's something that I've seen and thought, there may be those that don't have the internet, but they're going to have a phone. And so perhaps there's another possibility of connecting with them that way. But these are things that we're just kind of beginning to look at now. As I say, the online stuff took a fair bit of work, but also we felt on balance was the path of least resistance, certainly when you have to react quickly to things.
I mean, I've seen it exactly the same. I set up the telephone thing yesterday.
Well, you must let me know how you found it.
There's a really, really good idiot's guide to it. That's very helpful. I had a conversation during the week with one of our elders, whose mum is also an elder, and we'd set up a phone tree kind of very early on just to make sure that everybody was okay. And we, the next round of calls was coming, and I was very mindful of Kenny's question. What about these people that aren't online? What do we do for them? Are they just getting missed completely? And so I'd said, can you ask people if they would be interested in accessing the service by phone? And this person said, yeah, my mum said that, and I thought she was kidding. It's like, how would you do that? It's actually quite simple to set up. It's a local rate call, and it's very cheap on our end as well. I think it's like $0.01 a minute for listening, kind of thing. So it's very, very cheap. But I've got no data on it yet. We only did it yesterday, so I can't tell you whether it was worthwhile or not.
One of the things I've seen people do, I know that certainly elders in our congregation have been giving people phones with the service loaded onto them.
Right.
Like wiping it down and disinfecting it and posting it through the letterbox so they could watch it on a tablet or something like that. So it's kind of pre-recorded almost onto a device. There's someone else I know who was basically getting all their old smartphones and using them and putting pay-as-you-go SIMs in them for people so they could use a smartphone to watch it and stuff. So it's quite an interesting way of either helping people get online or finding mediums that you can get people to the service with. But like you guys, I think a lot of people are phoning or dialing into things. And, I think the number of people in our congregation that have discovered WhatsApp recently, and are connecting through that. So there's a prayer group WhatsApp, there's a prayer group, this, that, and the next thing for people that want it as well, which is really encouraging because you kind of, I think the one thing that does make me slightly nervous is, are you, by having all these little groups in amongst a congregation, does it mean when we all come back together that there's some relationships that have fallen away and there's other ones that have built up? It's quite, it'll be an interesting dynamic if that's what it comes to. I don't think it will, but it'd be interesting to see.
But I mean, what you're describing for me is not necessarily a bad thing, because essentially what you've created by accident is a series of house groups.
That's exactly how I was when I referred to it in a call earlier. Was you may find that's what church becomes for 6 months. It could be house groups.
Yeah, and it's not even then. It's not any different from at coffee morning. People sit at different tables.
Exactly.
We don't all sit together all of the time. So I'm not particularly concerned about that. My concern would always be for anything that it becomes exclusive and that other people can't join it. Or
I think
people
that's
feel
probably
that
what
they
I was
have
more
to
getting at,
they have to contribute when they don't really want to anymore. So there's a bit of that. I worked out this morning. We've got 7 channels for a Sunday service now.
Wow.
Just because we do much like Stuart, we post it on YouTube. It goes on Facebook. It's on the website. We strip the audio off it and stick it up as a podcast. People can have it as a CD. They can now phone in and listen to it, and they can have a printed copy if they want. So I kind of got to the point where I was thinking, right, so if that's not good enough, then there's nothing else that we can. I can't think of anything else that we could do other than going round to somebody's house and like shouting at them through the window,
preaching in the front lawn for them.
Yeah,
I can see you doing that.
Yeah, that'd be okay. I think.
Stuart Butler with a sandwich board and a bell in one hand and a What about have you managed to involve your congregation in your services yet? Like, have you? Because like our minister Alan Gibson, that's what he gets people to like video themselves and send them it on WhatsApp or whatever. Then he kind of integrates that into the service. So like on Sunday there, 4 of us had to put a clip. 3 of us had to tell a lie, a fairly convincing one, and 1 person had to tell the truth. And the idea was that the congregation, based on those 4 statements, had to decide who was most likely to be telling the truth. And then it was revealed at the end, who was telling the truth, kind of thing. And it was all relating back to doubting Thomas, and being able to see Jesus and stuff like that, and how people believe things in different ways and how in different manners and things. And different people do the readings every week and stuff now as well, and folk can send messages of thanks and videos and all sorts of stuff. And again, it's a nice way of keeping in touch with people. But I don't know what your thoughts are on that. Like, have you managed to do that yet, or is it sort of something you're thinking about? Or
we've had folk kind of similar. We've had people doing the reading and the prayers, and last week, 2 weeks ago, we asked the Sunday school kids to all record themselves saying the Lord's Prayer, and I cut that all together, so they're all in it, kind of thing. And I'll just keep re-editing that, so that it's different every other week or something, so that they're all saying a different bit. Or I got some of them. It's interesting. Some of them I can't use it all because they got it wrong, and some of them only said some bits, and so it was actually quite difficult to put it together because they're thinking, right, what bit did they say? Right, we'll need to use somebody else for that. And thankfully, some of the older ones were, and they're not very good at leaving gaps so that you can cut it as they were.
Super quick, yeah.
So, but that's been really nice, and people have really appreciated being able to see them. Like you, one of the kind of, I think for me, one of the best things has been Sunday school. We're still doing Sunday school at 11 o'clock, and I wish we could get away with half an hour. I've got to throw the kids off at 12:30. We're kind of like, I need to go and eat, go away. And they really look forward to it because they're not getting to see their pals in the same way that they usually would. And so we've just been doing much as we would have done anyway, kind of story, crafts, games, kind of stuff. And we tell them the night before what they're going to need, so everybody's got their sort of craft stuff looked out, and if we need anything for the games and stuff, and we just do that in Zoom, and it's been absolutely brilliant. That's been by far one of the most successful things, and a bit like putting stuff online, other people are going to look at it. We've had kids coming to Sunday school that were very much on the kind of periphery of that would maybe come once in a while, or hadn't been for ages, and so we're getting 20 or 25 kids every Sunday, and mostly before it could range from 2 to 20, and it was always a bit random. Whereas now it's a much more kind of predictable, solid group, and people have come who weren't really able to come. So folk that were maybe in the same kind of situation as Stuart and Ruth, you've got a new baby, that's difficult to arrange your life around, so that you can say, at 11 o'clock on a Sunday morning, my child's not going to need fed or changed, or we've managed to get it together this morning to get out the door, and so we've had quite a few two or three folk that have both somebody who's maybe 5 or 6, but also a younger kind of baby or toddler in the house who have been able to join us that just wouldn't have been able to do that very easily on a Sunday morning, because it meant getting ready and coming and bringing stuff and hoping that everything was going to be okay. And then, that kind of, so it's just easier for them to join in, and they've loved it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, our Sunday school stuff's like, it goes from kind of preschool kids, so nursery kids. I think the oldest we had on was S3 maybe, so it's quite a big group, or quite a big range of ages. And I think we're kind of now at the point where every other week we're going to split it, so it's like the older group do stuff with us like they normally would on a Sunday, and then the younger group do stuff the other week and things. But it's a good, like you said, it's a nice way of keeping them together, because it's funny how church friends aren't always the first ones that you want to catch up with, because you kind of see them regularly. But we've had a lot of great feedback from parents and from folks to say how much they're appreciative of it, which has been fantastic. It's been really, really good to hear. So it's going to be interesting to see how we can keep that going and see what happens with, the next stages or steps or whatever's going to happen in the next 3 to 6 weeks, if anything changes. And how we can kind of start to think about that, which will be interesting.
I think we're, from today's press conference, I think we're in lockdown again for another 3 weeks.
Oh, at least. Absolutely.
At least. So, yeah. And then, I suppose the question is starting to kind of float around. So what happens when we're not? That obviously you kind of alluded to that at the beginning, Kenny, that things are not going to be the same even when we're allowed out of lockdown. So when we go back to church, it's going to look quite different, because we're going to have to make some kind of social distancing possible, and depending on what kind of layout you've got, that's more or less difficult. Who's allowed to come? Again, if we're talking about older people and people with medical conditions aren't allowed out yet, if they're still kind of involved in shielding, then that makes the whole thing quite different. So one of the things you've avoided then, Stuart, by resisting a Sunday service is the kind of, so I've made a rod for my own back now. I've created something that's slightly different from Sunday. So when we go back, people are going to expect normal Sunday, and then there's a whole load of people that want Sunday video because it's different. Whereas you've offered something that you can keep going, I guess, to a greater or lesser extent. You can do it in real life, but you can also do it online. And it takes a lot of preparation, but it's not the same as having to deliver 2 different services every Sunday.
I do hope to be able to continue something like this, even as we approach something that vaguely looks like normality. But I also kind of harbour the hope that we don't. There's going to be a period when we can't go back to normal out of necessity. There will then come the next period where we could go back to normal if we really wanted to. But personally, I kind of hope that we don't. And I don't just mean within the church. I've been thinking about this in terms of just society in general, that this situation has highlighted in an extreme way many of the inadequacies and inequalities of what we called normal. And to kind of unthinkingly sleepwalk back into that would be devastating. And I think for, one of the things that I reflected on for our own congregation is I think that we, as we do approach normal, will need to reflect on what shape our services of worship take. Because I get the feeling that unless you're inducted into that, unless you turn up and you know what's happening, it's such a barrier to people who don't know, oh, this is the point where you stand up, this is the bit where you sit down and stuff like that. And if the research is to be believed and people are turning to faith in this like they never have before, then we have such an opportunity when we can get back into our buildings to have seekers coming and asking their questions and wanting to find out more. And if they come and find an inaccessible church because it's so steeped in its own way of doing things, well, we've missed a trick. Absolutely missed a trick. So I'm hopeful to keep some things going online. We'd toyed with the idea of doing stuff online anyway. I think that you're right, this is manageable. But looking ahead, even as we do approach normality, I hope we've got the wisdom to think more critically and positively about what we could do, rather than, oh, let's just, go back to what we've always known, how it's been, as they say.
Yeah, it's funny how it takes a crisis to push us into doing those kinds of things, isn't it? That
what's that saying? Necessity is
the mother of invention.
Yes,
yeah, and it's true. Of course, it's true. That all kinds of things have happened, and people have learned things that they had no idea how to do before. And so, did you said you'd harboured ambitions of being a YouTube star? Sorry, content creator.
Yes.
Before, but I think star's probably the right word. Star. Yeah. Influencer, perhaps.
Yeah, something like that.
Something like that. So did you? I was very aware that I had a mobile phone and a box of cables in the garage that I'd kept forever. That was my kind of starting point. So how have you done it? I suppose is the kind of boring techie question. What are you using to create this content?
I was fortunate in that I think it would have been December last year, I was already starting to have a lot more online meetings anyway. So I decided, I had a rubbishy wee webcam that I got 10 years ago. I thought, if I'm doing more online meeting wise, I need something a bit better. So I went and I got a webcam that can record in HD, and I got this trendy headset so that I can hear and speak to people. So when this happened, I was lucky in that I already had a camera that could record in decent enough quality, and it's set up on my PC monitor at the moment. You've got the background of the study kind of, reasonably tidy behind me. And my computer's got the mic port. So most of it was already there. The first problem I ran into was that behind me is a lovely big bay window that lets in huge amounts of light. And so I was a silhouette. So I started by having to steal Ruth's bedside lamp and kind of sit it there, because it was the only bulb that we had that could produce daylight temperature of light so that my face didn't look really strange. But eventually what I got was a lamp like this that's got a flat surface. So now I can position that beside me and it lights up my face so that I can be seen. Another issue that I ran into, I pinched one of the radio mic things from the church. I thought I really should get my own one. So I did an eBay and I got one that was decent, but the cable was too short, because I need to sit about here for it to look okay, but the cable was too wee. So, there's been a bit of trial and error having to get different cables and stuff like that, but the basics were all there. The other thing that I then needed to learn was how to edit videos. And as I said, having been a user of YouTube for many years, well, that's where I went, and just doing a search for, what was it, something like best free video editor 2020, enter, and then, it just all came up. So I went for software called Shotcut. It's open source software, so it's free and legal to download. The folk that have developed it, you can donate to them if you want, but their software is free to use. And it's actually really user-friendly. There's also loads of tutorials on YouTube itself if you need any help. So, if I'm trying to do a particular effect, not that I am very often, mind you, but if there's something I want to work out how to do, just a search will find me the video that means I can I can do it. The one thing I've discovered, which is something we've yet to overcome, upload speeds on our internet are appallingly bad, and there's not much you can do about that. So it can be a case of I need to let Ruth know and say, for the next 2 hours, the Wi-Fi is going to be completely useless because I'm uploading something and it will take a wee while. So that's, we'll overcome that somehow.
Apparently upload anxiety is a thing.
I can believe that, yes.
Yeah, you think you're finished, but you're not.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that kind of last phase is always a bit, it's worse when you get to the point where you think it's uploaded and it hasn't. So you've just spent all that time and it doesn't appear where it's supposed to.
One thing I have found, which I mean, I really have to ration myself, it's faster for me to link my computer to my mobile phone and upload through 4G than it is through the Ethernet cable into the modem. I then my phone started giving me warnings saying, you've used more data this month than you usually have. You only have this, this is your limit. So I thought, oh, right, okay, I need to save that for emergencies when I need to get something up quickly. And the rest of the time we just suffer with the fact that there's no Wi-Fi for a couple of hours.
Well, what's your approach been in terms of pastoral care? Things like, we can't go and visit people to organise funerals and, all those kinds of things. So what's that been like for you?
Phoning, lots of phoning. I've encouraged everybody in the we've not taken maybe as organised an approach as it sounds as though Motherwell South have done, but there's been lots of encouragement. Just phone elders, phone their district, friends, phone people. It's been good actually, because as I've kind of been sort of phoning around different folk, I am hearing, oh yes, I heard from so and so, and this other person keeps up. So, there's a sense that I think it doesn't feel as urgent for me to be phoning around everybody, because the consensus across the board seems to be the folk are pretty good at keeping up with each other. It's been interesting just to bump into people as you do your hour of state mandated exercise every day. When Ruth and me and Anna have gone out a walk, we've been able to bump into some folk and have a chat with them. So it's been good to catch up face to face. I have to say, if there's one thing that I would happily see the back of in all this, it's how we're having to deal with funerals, because that's been really, really hard. I find it. There's a couple of reasons I find it hard. The first is that your workload increases for the same amount of output. So if you imagine a funeral visit, you might get half a dozen members of a family together in one room and you have a conversation. And by the end of it, you've got all the information you need for a tribute. Now, to talk to the same number of people, you're talking 5 or 6 individual phone calls. Because often, a brother and a sister are in different households and so cannot be in the same place. So that it's more of a time sink in that sense. And then you get to the actual trying to provide care itself. And, I did a funeral yesterday, and it was just, all I wanted to do was to go up to the deceased and give her a hug and shake her husband's hand and stuff like that. But instead I'm sort of, feels like you're sort of loitering back and hanging back, and you can't have that same proximity. And also you're in a crematorium which is limiting attendance, so you've got this vast room with two there. That's been hard. It's hard on families, don't get me wrong, it's really hard on families, but actually as the one conducting the funeral, it's hard being the one doing it as well, because this is just not the way that you'd want to do things.
I'd have to agree. I find particularly cremations much more difficult. I agree in terms of the preparation and stuff, but a burial seems a bit more normal in some kind of senses, even though people are spread out. It's more, I suppose it's probably just more recognisable as what it would be. Whereas, being at the Creme, and they're all different is the other kind of thing. We use 3 different ones, and they're all taking different approaches. So one of them has chairs all spread out across the place. One's pews. Some of them are kind of taped off, so you can't sit in the same one. And the other one haven't changed the seating at all. They just encourage people not to sit together, which in some senses feels much more normal because all the chairs are there. So you go into the one where there's only 12 chairs, and it feels really weird because there's usually 150 chairs, and it just feels really strange. So some of that just about how they've dealt with the space is interesting in terms of the experience. But yeah, it's not satisfactory in any sense, I don't think. And I wonder how much of an issue that's causing for people kind of in the longer term. That people who can't come, or people who can come, but it's not a helpful, or it's just not a helpful experience necessarily. It's a necessary one, but it's not helpful in the same way that it might have been.
I did a funeral recently for a member who, I'm sure if this had been a normal situation, the attendance from the congregation would have been very good. There were 2 people, her 2 nephews. Her husband was not able to attend because he's in a care home, and the care home
wouldn't let him out.
Yeah, they wouldn't. And I'm not critical of that decision. I actually think they made the right call.
Yeah.
But what we did for that was one of the nephews filmed the service and subtitled it, so it is on YouTube. And the husband was able to watch it after the fact. And his hearing's not good, so he was able to read the subtitles. And members of the congregation were able to watch it after the fact. But what we did say was, once some semblance of normality returns, there will be a service for her in the church building. But I did wonder at the time, if we're still 6-9 months away from that, to what extent is that helpful for family members who, for all intents and purposes, have already moved on? And actually, to have a memorial service at that point could bring open old wounds that don't need to be. So there's no answer to that. I'm just, you're right. It's a tricky one.
But even in that difficulty, it again prompts us to think about new and different ways to do things, doesn't it? So you're offering a film of something that we would never consider having filmed before. I know that South Lanarkshire Creme have started streaming, and they weren't doing it before, but they are now. So that people can join. And it kind of forces us into doing some things that we maybe should have been thinking about anyway. Because these things are always issues, aren't there? There's always somebody that can't come. There's always somebody who's stuck somewhere far away, or and because it's only 1 or 2 people, then we maybe don't see the necessity for it. But when it's the opposite, and only 1 or 2 people can come, and everyone else is stuck at home, then the push to make sure that we include people and things becomes much more significant.
Really, really interesting point, because like the two Sundays before lockdown happened, we had that very conversation about how to best record and broadcast what we do as a church, because kind of what effectively had happened with someone who had an HD video recorder and sat at the front and recorded the children's address, the Bible reading, and the sermon, and then that's what went onto Facebook. But we were starting to say, well, actually, how many people would want to watch it live? How many people would want to, and where does it become a source of evangelism over and above just providing a service for someone who's not able to make it? it kind of going back a little bit to the conversation we were having earlier about how it's forcing us to change. It will be interesting to see how all the changes the Church of Scotland have talked about making, and wanting to be more relevant, how this sort of process and thinking that we've all had to go through will dictate that somewhat, because realistically it's completely changed how we go about doing business. And then that raises the question, why do we do business the way we do business, and why do we do worship the way we do worship? And if it's because we've done it that way for 250 years, welcome to the 21st century. Let's start to think about it differently. And case in point, we've talked about me living miles away from the church already. I am a presbytery elder and I'm on our worship committee. So that usually necessitates me going through to Motherwell for meetings face-to-face 2, 3, 4 times a month. Now, typically that's not that much of a problem, but if I could do it on Zoom and with a wife who's in the shielding category because she's got chronic health problems, if I'm able to then in the future do all those calls via Zoom, great. And it means more people can get connected and contacted and be part of things like Kirk session meetings or committee meetings. If you're away in business, you can still dial in for it and that kind of stuff. So it's like you said, Stuart, I hope it just doesn't go.
Yeah.
I think there needs to be that period where we can sit back and say, do you know what? This worked and this didn't work. How do we make sure that it continues to work in a new and exciting and fresher way? That's the thing that I think is going to be really encouraging and exciting at the end of all of this, whenever that ends up being.
And I don't want to end up being a prophet of doom, but I think that question is vital to be asked. I'm not saying that we've got the answers to it, but it needs to be asked and seriously reflected on. The prophet of doom, and we would say, if we wander back to the old way of doing things with this attitude of, oh, good, we can go back to normal. That's, we've talked about the terminal decline in the Church of Scotland many a time before. I think that's what would finish us off, is if we say, oh, good, we can just go back to normal. Mm-hmm. And another thing which I think, just so it's, there are questions for society as well in all this, like people who were told, oh, you can't work from home suddenly. Oh, no, they can. And so this is changing things so much. And I just do hope that the church changes to keep up. Because if we don't, the message is still the same, but the way of telling it is changing. And if we don't keep up, then I fear for the future.
Absolutely. Agreed.
Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed our conversation today. You can leave your comments below, or if you're listening on the podcast, you can leave voice comments on anchor.fm and we can include them in the show at a later date. If you've got any questions or comments or stuff that you want us to think about or people that you would like us to talk to. Thanks again for tuning in, and we'll see you again soon.
Shut up and sit down.